Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November 5th, 2019 meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's a few minutes after 7 o'clock. I'm Brian Stein, the chair, for about 2 more minutes. Just go through what we have on the agenda for tonight. We have a site plan review for 59 and 63 Willow Street that the Hamilton Development Corp. Has submitted. We're going to be talking about a little bit of master planning stuff a little later and approve some minutes and other board business. So given that the Hamilton Development Corp. Is the applicant and both Rick and I are on that board, we will both be recusing ourselves tonight, and Dan Ham will be running the meeting as essentially an interim chair, and he'll be running the other meetings as well for this. But then after this meeting, I'll be running the rest of the meeting. So Rick and I will be sitting in the audience with all of you. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to the applicants and to Dan. And thank you for coming tonight.
You should probably read it because you started.
Right. Whoa. Rough landing.
Try this one.
Clearly, Ryan's a lot lighter than me.
Brian's a featherweight, huh?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'll start by reading the agenda. Site plan review of 59 to 63 Willow Ave, November 5th, 2019 at 7 p.m. The Hamilton Planning Board will hold a public hearing at the Hamilton Town Hall Memorial Room to begin its formal site plan review of the proposed project for 59 to 63 Willow Street as submitted by the Hamilton Development Corporation. The proposal is for a multifamily, multi-use dwelling. The location is located within the B Business Zoning District. The two parcels are also known as Assessor's Maps 61-000, lots 20 and 21. The applicant also proposes to construct associated appropriate site improvements to accommodate the intended use. The site plan review will be in accordance with the section 10.6 of the Hamilton zoning bylaw. Those wishing to speak on the matter should attend the formal board review. Jill.
I'm going to stand here. I think that's probably the most appropriate. Then I can, that's not going to lead everybody. Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of the Hamilton Development Corp. in connection with its application for site plan approval. I just wanted to discuss one administrative thing with you, Mr. Ham. Because there's 4 members present, is there going to be a 5th member, and who would that be?
Yes, Laura said that she will be available.
Okay.
She won't be attending the meeting, she's just gonna come in for the vote?
Well,
A sneaker, right?
she's going to avail herself of what's known as the Mullen Rule. The Mullen Rule is a piece of legislation that allows a board member, say Board of Selectmen or Planning Board, to either read the minutes or to watch the TV recording of the hearing that they've missed. They can only miss one of the discussions on the hearing. Ms. Walsh has to be out tonight. She's got child care at home, so she asked to be relieved, and I notified her that she has the ability to miss one and one only. So she committed to being at the remainder of the continued hearings by the board. So that's our status tonight. With 4 members, we do have a quorum. Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanna make sure you're not gonna vote tonight then?
I'm not a board member. I'm Patrick Reffett, Director of Planning and Inspections.
Then direct my questions to the chair.
And you should go to the microphone.
Well,
Can we have the
I'm
applicant-
confused about whether you're gonna vote tonight. I thought this was a public hearing. I didn't believe there was gonna be a vote.
It won't be a vote.
Okay, it was a simple question. Just wanted to confirm.
Okay, so with that administrative matter put to rest, thank you very much. I appreciate your indulgence. As I said, Jill Mann here on behalf of the HDC. We're here to request site plan review of a project that is basically has been summarized by Mr. Ham, which is a multi-use, multi-family building located in the business district. Here with me this evening in support of the application is a civil engineer, Charlie Ware and April Ferrara from Meridian Engineering, and also from the architectural firm of S&V Design is Thad Samasco and Kristen Broyles, who are the architects in connection with the design of the building itself. I think it may be really good just to give a background of the entire project, how this even came about and what we are proceeding under, i.e. the section of the bylaw that permits this type of use by right. The HDC, as everybody knows, was formed in 2012 pursuant to an act of legislature, and the reason for the formation was because there was identified to be an underserviced population in your town, that being anyone who did not want a very large home. For the most part, your bylaw permits single-family homes with some accessory apartment allowed and some two-family, but for the most part doesn't allow any more densely populated areas or any smart development until there were these zoning bylaw changes. So the HDC was formed in order to support that underserviced part of your community and to sponsor economic growth, economic development consistent with your master plan. And your master plan basically identified those areas in which your town was underserved, those being homes for younger people graduating school wanting to come back, empty nesters, people who are the product of separated homes, and people who aged out of their very large homes and wanted to stay within the community but not have a large burdensome property to maintain. So back in about 2015, the HDC sponsored a zoning article that would have allowed for mixed-use buildings. Mixed-use buildings simply mean you can have a commercial building and a residential building. That's kind of, if you will, for zoning purposes, we call that smart growth. So smart growth is the new, if you will, trend in zoning. And it typically tries to consolidate or be located near areas where there's high pedestrian availability, i.e. train stations, shopping, restaurants, and other types of community involvement or community activities located within walking distance of certain locations. So in 2015, the town meeting basically approved something called mixed use, which meant you could have commercial and residential. But in order to really sponsor and to create an area where you could have multifamily, so more than one or two dwellings, the HDC also sponsored, and the town did vote on having a particular provision that permitted within the business district the development of residential units, 2 and more, on the second and third floors of a building, and then commercial on the first floor. Again, that's what we consider to be in planning realm, smart growth. So that particular provision was inserted into your zoning bylaws. It was discussed, it was vetted, it was approved. It went to the AG, the Attorney General, who has to review all zoning changes, and it was endorsed, and it was sent back, and that is the current form of your bylaw. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that the current form that we're operating under, there's no misconception, there is no illegality, there is no failed adoption. That particular provision exists. And
So may I ask a quick question? So there is no limit on the number of apartments that can go on top of commercial use?
there always is, but so the limit.
No, in terms of permitted use. Let's not get into,
I don't understand your question, so in terms
the
of.
current bylaw says 2 or more.
Yep, exactly.
So if I wanted to build 30 stories on top of the Black Cow,
Well, you're saying story, so there's a difference. If you wanted to put 30 units and you had the available.
30 units. If I wanted to put 30 units in some way on top of the Black Cow, is there anything, 40 units, or anything to prevent me?
Yes.
By right.
Why don't we let her get through her
okay,
presentation and
I
then
mean, you
can ask
and your
questions.
town adopted it, and so the answer is really no.
I understand
There
that.
isn't. Yep, that is true. So that particular bylaw exists, and that's what we are governed by, and that's what we're proceeding under, and that means that there is a by right use for the particular property. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have limitations and conditions that we need to live up to, and that's the purpose of this evening's meeting and the purpose of hiring competent experts such as S&V and Meridian. So let's continue on. The HDC has intended on sponsoring this smart growth, and this particular property has been identified, and it actually was targeted by Harbor Light to be a part of an affordable housing development, which I know everybody knew about because that was supposed to be coupled with the Long Meadow project. Those two projects eventually did not make it forward. Harbor Light, when the Long Meadow combination was voted down by the town and was not put forth, they decided not to go forward either with this particular property. That particular development was going to be 20 units. This particular development is smaller. It is only 18 units. So I just wanted to give you some point of comparison. So essentially, that was put forth in, it was almost 2 years ago now, and we are presently moving forward with a project that we believe to be consonant with the area and in keeping with the intent of your bylaw and with the intent of your master plan. We are proceeding, as I said, under section 3.1A. 7, which is the residential by right use. We are subject to site plan approval, and that means we need to present to you a plan that shows that we can meet all of the requirements, that our buildings will be under 35 feet, that the particular property can sufficiently handle storm water management, that the particular property can handle a septic system that is Title V compliant. The property currently is serviced or is improved by a single-family home as well as Max. The intention is to combine Max, because Max is currently owned by the HDC as well as the single-family home. The intent is to combine the two parcels and to operate them as one whole. This particular project will be a footprint of about 7,200 square feet. The project will require the addition of various accessory uses that are accessory components, such as a driveway and parking areas. The way in which the bylaw has been drafted is, again, smart growth. That means the first floor must be commercial. In order to provide for that, we ended up putting in 2,400 square feet of commercial use. We thought that that was actually kind of in keeping with what was on Willow Street right now, and that would actually have some demand, because offices such as lawyers' offices, insurance agents, potentially real estate agents, things of that nature, this could be a great location for them. On that first floor also, there will be accessory residential uses. So we have 2 stories of residential on top, and the first floor will have a carport, so undercover parking, as well as a common room for the tenants, and then also an elevator to access the second floors. A couple of the comments that were made during our abutter meeting, we did have an informal abutter meeting, and we did present to you. And we did also receive comments back from some town officials. Some of the comments were, do you have enough parking? We absolutely have enough parking when we meet the parking criteria. We provide for parking for the commercial, and Charlie and April are going to go through that. We provide parking for the commercial, and we provide sufficient parking, at least one parking space per unit for the residential users. And we are no less than 500 feet separated from the municipal parking lot that is adjacent to this particular site. As I had mentioned before, this site also is walking distance to the train, which makes it a prime location for this type of development. As far as the remainder of the property goes, we are developing it, as I said, to be able to support the other users. The fire department has actually asked us if we had sufficient room for a turnaround, and we are just going to be working with them. We're going to basically provide them with what they would like to see on the particular property. We have not had the opportunity to meet with them, so we're going to address those comments. Again, the police asked about the parking. We did have some comments relative to snow storage, and we do have snow storage areas identified. We also had some questions about, there was a question about a geotechnical review. So as this board knows, whenever you do a development, you have to do you have to test the ground to make sure, number one, that it is structurally sufficient to support the construction of a building, and you need to test to make sure that the soils are able or permeable to be able to filter groundwater and to filter septic water. Those tests have been done in 2017 and again in 2019. So yes, the soils were evaluated. We did confirm that they were sufficiently permeable to allow the types of systems that the engineers have designed. So those answers were all made. There are a couple of changes that we're going to continue to make to the plans, and we just are waiting to get all of the comments back. We did incorporate a lot of changes, though, as a result of that abutter meeting. As I had said, we added some additional landscaping from the set of plans that we had actually originally submitted and then gave you a new submittal recently. Those changes involved making sure we increase the setbacks, despite the fact that there really were no provisions for setbacks. We still provided for what the basis would be. We enhanced the landscaping and tried to create even a better reduction of massing so that when you would look at the site, it would appear less large, if you will. In addition to that, I do want to point out that people are always asking us, okay, so what is the difference between your mass, so your height, your perception, and those around you? This particular property is actually set lower than most of the properties around it. It is a bowl-shaped lot. In addition to that, the height of our building is only 4 feet greater than the height of the most adjacent building, the, I call it Railroad, the yellow, large, I guess it is also a mixed-use building to the left of the property. So we have actually looked at those perspectives and can give you an idea, and we'll have a picture of the perspective so that you actually can get an idea of what this particular project looks like in comparison to those units and or homes around it. At this point, I think it might be a good idea to turn it over to Thad. You to start? Thad is as I said, the architect, and he's just going to describe the project in mass. I think you're better off up here.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody. Thad Samasco, SV Design, and Krista Broyles is the project architect who will probably fill in for me when I give the wrong answers to questions. I believe you all know where the site is, so I probably don't need to go into detail on that. And we did, I think, in the informal review, kind of give you a tour around the site. The Salem 5 Bank on Railroad, going by the Black Cow. This is the parking lot behind the Black Cow and the Salem 5, looking back at our site with a Timeless Interiors building on Railroad off to the right there. And our site is straight through those trees and kind of, again, slightly lower, as Joe mentioned. Thank you. And as you come down Railroad Avenue, there's bits and pieces of our site. The gap on the left side of the Timeless Interiors building is a small little walkway that almost connects to the post office across the street. That kind of thing. You can see the scale of the buildings. Again, I think all of you know this. We were involved in both the Salem 5, cleaning that building up years back, and also the Accord Food Pantry, which recognizes has a budding municipal parking lot to our site, and seems like a good opportunity for some pedestrian access to come across from our site onto that. This is looking back at it, with that parking lot in that location there. And then when you get onto Willow, backs up on the upper left, to the right of that is our driveway. That's the driveway into the house. It would be the same driveway. It is our automobile access point to the site. Of course, the driveway would be enhanced, in width to accommodate the capacity of the project. And that top view is the house next door, kind of looking back. So when we first looked at the site, we did this kind of site analysis, and we recognized the residential abutters on Railroad Avenue and Linden, and we thought we'd want to stay as far away from them as we could. We recognized there's parking and commercial uses on both Railroad and Bay Road, how important those would be. We looked at where the sun was coming from. We looked at the topo, generating the setbacks, and of course, the one place to access the site with a vehicle is the current access point, and kind of how that all kind of sort of shook out. And then, of course, we have the existing site plan that, as Joe mentioned, the high point is at Willow Street, and it comes down to kind of a bowl shape, and Charlie and April will discuss, the fact that this collects a pretty good sized catchment area of surface runoff and how that would be handled. The other things note on the site are the residential properties that are bordering it on Willow, and the commercial properties that are on the other two sides, which kind of informed where we decided, to put the building. So this is where we ended up. The building is kind of a L-shaped. You see here it's pushed as far toward the Railroad Avenue building, Railroad Avenue side of the property as we could. We have a 15 plus, maybe 6-inch foot setback on that side, and it's to allow the maximum amount of buffer zone to the neighbors on this side. There's a stand of really tall trees in here, which we wanted to preserve. And then I'll show you later how I'll show you now, I guess. We've got a fence coming in here for a 6-foot privacy fence, a row of arborvitae here, a mixture of cedar and plants in here, and some Rocky Mountain cedars in here. So the combination of eastern white cedars, or eastern red cedars, and Rocky Mountain cedars are in here to provide a good buffer. We come down from the driveway in. Parking is in this location mostly for the commercial space. 2,400 feet, requires 8 cars. So they're generally located in this zone. Come around the bend, and there's parking here for the units. This is a carport under the building for nine of the cars. But generally speaking, we'd expect most of the residential parking would be back here, and the commercial parking would be back here. And we'd expect, if it's sort of the typical kind of office, end of the day, folks are going home from office work, and folks are coming home from work, so that there'd probably be a pretty good shared parking thing happening. In terms of pedestrian access, we have a good sidewalk coming down this length here that comes down here. This part of the building is actually a covered arcade, so you're out of the rain. That comes around to what would be a residential entrance in this location. You can continue on that sidewalk down to the parking area here. You can get into our building from the carport in this, right through a section right in there. There's also a commercial entrance right in here, which we think will be, noticed pretty strongly from the municipal lot on this side. And there's a secondary residential entrance here, so folks going to the train might come out this way, come across the lot, and go down Railroad. And there's a small little sitting area. There's an interesting little spot here. There's a couple good-sized trees that we think would make a nice, intimate little kind of sitting spot, which we've incorporated in the plan. Thinking that's as much commercial used as residential. The residential folks have a evergreen lined area here, which sort of have a barbecue grill, picnic table, kind of outdoor patio area for them. Again, with a row of arborvitae here to give them some privacy. And then this whole line here is shown a row of arborvitae screening along that line for the Black Cow parking lot. There are shown some large maple trees in here. Coming in here, these 3 are hornbeam. Coming in here are a columnar type maple tree that grows sort of tall and thin, so that to try to take the edge off of the property as you come in to it. So it's a pretty robust landscape plan. Most of what I've highlighted here are the larger species. There's a lot of ground cover, that are showing up, and you have that whole schedule, I know, in your packet that talks through what the plants are and, the rhododendron and so forth. We are fencing the Railroad Avenue property. Timeless Interiors has their property line is about here. We're fencing that off. There's a bunch of trees in here that we're going to prune and kind of clean up, but we think it will take away the massing of the building, the apparent massing of the building. But here we do want to keep that corner exposed so folks coming, looking at the building from Railroad would be invited in and make that hopefully that commercial space hopefully an attractive for someone who might lease it. So I think that's sort of the logic behind the site planning. Charlie and April talk about a large drainage catchment area here and a septic system in here and why they went there versus anywhere else on the site. But anyway, that's our thinking, was to try to reduce the impact of this building on the residential side and have it glued nicely into the Railroad Avenue and Bay Road commercial side of the world, if you will. So in floor plan, the far left of the sheet is on the Willow side. This is that colonnade I talked about. A T-shaped building does reduce the apparent mass of the building because you sort of see one leg and you see that leg rather than the whole length. This side, of course, is against the Railroad Avenue side. As mentioned, that's the commercial space, and then these are all support spaces for residential project. The sort of birthday party room called the Commons, a fitness and wellness room. Sometimes folks want to work at home. We give them a little office they can work from. There's storage for tenants for some of their larger items, and then trash would be brought in here and then brought out this way. And again, as Jill mentioned, an elevator, and then of course the carport for the balance of it. As you go up to a typical floor, the second and third floors are generally identical. There are, as shown here, 18 units, 9 per floor. 4 of them are 2 bedrooms, 14 of them are 1 bedrooms. So a total of 22. It's about 8,300 square feet per floor. We have the 2 bedrooms on the ends here, kind of on the corner. Where it seemed appropriate to provide some exterior small balconies, we've provided them. There are some places where we have these Juliet balconies, which is basically a doorway opening up to a railing that allows some fresh air in and a little more light, but it's not something you'd step out onto. I know at one of the butter meetings I wasn't at, but I understand there were some balconies here, and there might have been some concern about being a little bit too close and looking into their backyard. So we thought pulling those back would be beneficial as well. But so basically, the typical floor plan has a ring, this sort of L or T shape of units wrapped around a central core that has an elevator and a stair, and probably a skylight on the roof that might let some light down into the middle of the building. Units are roughly 650 square feet for a 1 bedroom, which is a pretty good sized 1 bed. There are a couple 1 beds that are a little larger. Sometimes we'll put in a small open alcove room where somebody might, again, work from home or have a little extra space within their unit. And then the 2 beds are the 800 square feet. The goal is to have these be reasonably affordable apartments, generous enough but affordable. And I think the little bit of extra storage space on the ground floor to have your bike and your artificial Christmas tree or whatever stored off season are being provided. With the elevator, we can have accessibility up to the so someone visiting who might have some mobility issues can get up to the 2nd and 3rd floor. It's a nice amenity to have in a building like this. So generally speaking, this is what it looks like if you were coming just to the right of the driveway. This is the colonnade I mentioned with the commercial space. There's the couple trees that are existing here with a small sitting wall area here, sort of contemplation area for lack of a better term. And then the building sort of tees out and has, again, the 3 stories. And this is that birthday party or commons room. And the carport is treated with some windows on that end to appear to be building and not sort of parking garage, if you will. There's a recessed entrance in back here, as I mentioned before. So this is kind of indicating the fence that's being added along the property line and starting to peek out of the evergreen shrubs that will be planted there. Good size to start, but we would expect it to grow pretty rapidly. The materials traditional in New England, we have a shingle band running across the top and sort of a clapboarded secondary line, and then kind of a board and batten look down on the ground. Again, kind of layering this helps make it seem a little less tall than if it was just one sheer wall. We have a fair amount of texture. There's like a bay window that pops out here, and these decks help provide a little bit of mass so it's not so much a sheer wall. The roof, there's a flat spot up here, but from all sides you can't tell, and so that was where we can put our air conditioning units and keep those in the center of the building to reduce any kind of noise impact. Also, the elevator overrun can be contained within that roof structure so that you won't be seeing one of those boxes that I understand can sometimes be controversial. So if you look at the building straight on from the Linden side, if you will, toward Railroad, this is that commercial arcade area and entrance, and this is that parking garage or carport rather, and then that's the residential entrance. You kind of see how it lays out. So this section here is that T that comes quite a bit further forward from this back section that you see here. Traditional windows, traditional divisions, probably a dark evergreen color and kind of a gray on gray scheme with white trim for the building. To note the height, it's a 35-foot allowable in the zoning, which probably would prevent you from doing the 30 stories on top of a building thing. We're working with 32.5 feet is by your definition of what our building height would be, so we're 2.5 feet under the maximum allowed for this mixed use project.
What is the height of the peak?
I'll get to that in 1 second, if that's okay.
Yep.
I don't want to misspeak. And I have it somewhere. This is the carport view from the Banks parking lot and the Black Cow. If you're looking your back, so there's sort of the carport for the 9 cars, and then again we're using these projected gables to again help reduce the apparent mass of the building and have it be a big sheer wall, as does this treatment of the shingling versus the clapboarding. And even, some of these gables are helping to articulate a more traditional New England kind of commercial architecture, vernacular architecture. If you could take down the Timeless Interiors building and look at this is what that view would be, the Railroad Avenue view. The truth is you really pretty much see this end kind of poking out into the town parking lot, and this will be pretty difficult to see this end. We have a door coming out of near that fitness area, so folks who might be going for a run or something can come in and out of that door. This is a service door to access some mechanical equipment, that kind of thing. And you can see those balconies are again helping us, we think, with the massing reduction issue. And from Willow Street, if you could take Max down, which kind of covers most of this, you'd see this end of the building mostly, which I can show you. Again, this is pretty much more or less what you would see of the building coming down. So from down the driveway, you're really almost seeing just this face and a little bit of that face, but we want to get you this perspective to kind of give you, I think this gives you a good feel for what the L shape does for the massing. So there's a bunch of building in that back corner that you're not aware of from any angle, unless perhaps an airplane. If you're looking across the town lot at the building, there's a bunch of trees here, as I mentioned, which would take out, as I said, would take out most of the view, and then you'd see this bit of commercial piece, kind of coming out. This is, Photoshop, absolutely not 100% perfectly scientific, but our best judgment as to what you would see from the parking lot. There's of course a cord here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie or April to talk through drainage and utilities and all that. And then at the end, I do have slides with some cross sections that will answer your question, Mr. Clark, about total height and that kind of thing. That's okay.
Step to the next one. What do I press?
Next one.
Okay, I'm gonna come back. Good evening. My name's Charlie Ware. I am a civil engineer with Meridian Associates. I also have with me tonight April Ferraro, who also is another civil engineer. We worked on this project together. The utilities, I'll just jump to the utilities. I think that Thad did a pretty good job of outlining access points and parking, location of the building. The utilities are all available in Willow Street. There's water.
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Sure. There's water as well as electric and gas all available in Willow Street, and we'll be, I'm actually going to step
Those are shown, we're shown connecting here with the water and the gas, and electric would also come in at that end of the building. The other piece of that we have is the septic system on the site, and that leaching field is right there. It'll be underground, so it won't be seen. There's also 2 septic tanks before you go into a pump chamber, which pumps up into that. We did soil testing on this site. There was soil testing that was done 2 years ago. And then more recently, there was soil testing done that was witnessed and approved by the Board of Health. The Board of Health actually makes decisions on, for example, what the depth of groundwater is. And so it's been reviewed by the town's Board of Health's soil evaluator, and we had 2 separate certified soil evaluators from Meridian review the soils as well. And the groundwater determination, one of the most important pieces of a design parameter, was determined by that group of 3 different, and it was all confirmed. It came out about the same. We also investigated groundwater that was found in some of the abutting septic systems, and those confirmed that the groundwater found around the limits of the site were about the same as what we were finding in here as well. The septic system is designed to handle, we've got a total of, there's the 18 units, total of 22 bedrooms, and then there's 2,400 square feet of commercial space, plus there's 900 commercial space that's in max, because we are gonna take, right now max, my understanding is, I believe it has a failed septic system, so part of this project will be to tie the septic system, or to tie the sewerage from max back into this septic system. So that's been sized. It's sized for it's about 2,670 gallons per day. That's the equivalent of about 5 or 6 homes, single-family homes. And the density of the site with 1 acre, if you take the 1 acre site and you take the density of that amount of sewerage, that's about in keeping with, in fact, I'll jump over to that. This is the overall downtown area. There's our site, and that's Route 1A. As you can see, the whole neighborhood in this area, and even out in here, there are a lot of homes, a lot of buildings in that area. It's pretty densely populated. And the number of units that we were proposing, and the sewerage that's on this site is very much in keeping with the density that's in the rest of this neighborhood, just to give a sense of that we're not introducing a large amount of sewer to this site beyond what's occurring. The soil evaluation found that we have very porous, what we call very drainable soil. It's very porous sands and gravels. And a review of the soil conservation soil service mapping shows that this whole area is underlain with that type of soil, which is probably one of the reasons why a neighborhood was able to grow up here over the years. I'm sure it goes back over a century, but having those good soils below really promoted the ability of a tightly knit neighborhood to grow up in that area. And you can see that really this site is really just a very small part of really a much larger neighborhood. The other piece I was going to get to was the drainage. While we're on this, is the drainage on the site is actually overall the storm. You see this wetland up in this area, but the limit of the basin that kind of captures the downtown, the high spot, is right in this area, and then really all the drainage is coming back and heading toward the Miles River. So there's really a pretty constant, steady flow in this direction, and it's captured through any number of catch basins and drainage structures, and some of it runs overland, but it does all end up down here in the river. The other thing that's feeding the river is the groundwater that it's in this area. And it's from this high spot to the river, it's about a 30-foot drop overall. You would anticipate, really, when you think of the groundwater here, you could think of it as an underground lake. I think of it more as almost like an underground river in terms of if you imagined like the Merrimack River is several hundred feet wide. When you see it, it appears to be flat, but it actually has a small gradient to it. And with if you had tighter soils, you'll find, pretty good gradients in a groundwater. With the very good soil we have in here, in about a 30-foot drop, it's probably about pretty constant, flat, relatively flat gradient that you would find over there. To go back to the, it's not working. Oh, there we go. What we had done, one of the kind of challenges to this site is that the area of the site doesn't have an outlet for drainage. The drainage around the neighborhood, around Linden and Railroad, Willow, and from Route 1A, everything drains onto the site. During very large rainfalls, we did a pre-construction stormwater analysis of the site, and we found that in the center of this site, in large storms, you will get some ponding in this area. The observations on the site, in turn, we don't have any staining or it doesn't appear that there's long-term water being held on that site. I would anticipate, and from what I've spoken with people on the site, that there is short-term ponding of the site, and that reflects right back to the predictions that our stormwater analysis made. And we found groundwater in this area to be just down between 3 and 4 feet. This is the low spot on the site. So our approach on this was to place an infiltration basin, which is approximately, the low spot is just about there. We're just beyond it, but it's really in the same spot. But our goal was to create as much storage as we could in the same place that the storm water goes now. We'll also be changing really the material in the bottom of that basin. Right now, that area is really lawn. It's loamed in lawn, and the lawn in the loam prohibits the water from getting down into the ground as quickly as it could. So what we'll do is we'll put a more sandy material and some stone in there to promote that water getting into the ground more quickly. And there's also a second infiltration basin in this location, which again has, in that case, there really isn't anything to prohibit to get it to the ground other than the soil, and the soil is very porous. So we provided an analysis to this board showing that the stormwater that runs from the perimeter of the site, as well as that runs off of these buildings and parking lot, will be captured and recharged to the groundwater in this area. I know some of the concerns that the neighbors had is, well, gee, you're introducing an awful lot of water onto the site. What about my basement? My basement is going to flood. Two things about that. Number one is that the stormwater which runs to this site is the same volume of stormwater that runs there now. The stormwater doesn't get out of the site. As I said, there's no outlet. So the water that runs is about 2.2 acres that runs. So the volume of water in both the pre-construction condition and the post-construction condition are the same. So we're recharging the same amount of water to the ground. The second part is
What
that,
about your septic fields, though? You're adding water from
Yep.
that?
Yep.
Okay.
And in a septic system, the septic system here, if you take the amount of water that runs, and that's why and I'll get back to that, but the septic system is about, it's 2,600 gallons a day. If you take that in terms of cubic feet, that's about 350 cubic feet per day. It's less than 1% of what you would anticipate in a large rainstorm. It's a very small amount, comparatively speaking, of the total water that gets there. And then the reason I had started off with the explanation about about the groundwater in the comparison with a river is that in situations like this, the impacts, the groundwater is really, there's too much water for even 2,600 gallons a day, and that's why I go back to this. You know, this is really a very small site. Just imagine that this whole area is groundwater that's running, and we're adding a small amount. Actually, we're not adding any amount from rainfall, and we're adding a very small amount compared with the septic. And what happens is there's just too much water to raise the groundwater table. Now you will get it's called a mounding effect. And the mounding effect will happen directly below the basins, right directly below the sewage system, the septic system, and it'll happen right directly below the drainage system. But that mounding is usually only a few inches, and given this type of soil, the very gravelly soil, you probably will only get a mound of a few inches, and it dissipates very quickly when you get away from the basin itself, usually only 10 to 15 feet beyond it, and then there's no impacts at all. So that's why they call it a mound, because it's a small mound that occurs over the system. So the installation of the septic systems and the installation of really promoting the infiltration on the site, which is occurring now, will have, in my opinion, no impact on the height of the groundwater outside of our site, and will have no impact on any of the abutting properties, septic systems or basements or any of that. So I think that's probably about the end of my presentation.
Can we, got a couple questions, if I may.
Can we wait till
Okay.
we get to that point? Or do you?
It was about this, but I can wait.
I prefer to, he has some more to give, right?
5 minutes more on these cross sections of the site, and then we can be done.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
That's fine.
Thank you, Charlie. So we took some site sections. This one is kind of cutting the site in half, looking at it from Willow across our site all the way to basically the Black House property line. So you're kind of looking at it, basically facing north, if you will. So this is the abutter across the street from us, who sits in this location, comes down, they're up a little bit high, comes down a little bit to Willow Street, and then comes down from there. As Joe mentioned, the driveway kind of comes down, and our building sits here at about elevation, I think that's 36.8, Krista? With the road being at, is that right?
So it's 56.8.
I gotta get my glasses fixed. 56.8 here and 59.6 there. Yeah, so it just comes down a little bit. And our building is sitting here, and the height of the roof, Krista, is that elevation from,
It is.
So this is looking towards railroad, which is all commercial, right?
correct.
Right, so no residential person is really being impacted on this view. Because this is all commercial.
Well, the folks who live on Linden would be looking at this if there wasn't the 6-foot fence with the hedge behind it that we're adding,
Okay, so this is
and those
from
super
Linden
tall trees.
looking all the
Yeah,
way
yeah,
up to-
that's probably a better way to
Okay.
say it.
Perfect, thank you.
But if we backed up onto the properties on Linden, you'd see fence, new evergreens, and then the tall, super tall, Norway maples and stuff that's way up at that canopy.
Okay.
So it kind of cut that away.
Yeah.
So mostly you can kind of see how, I think that, the building sits a little bit lower relative to Willow and about the same height. And then this is also showing you the height of our roof, which is, I think Joe mentioned 4, but it might be more like 5 feet taller than the 32 Railroad Avenue. And it's 36 feet tall to the ridge and 32.5 feet tall to as you do it by your zoning measurement, which is the midpoint between the eave and the ridge. That's your definition of building height from the front of the building to the midpoint between the eave and the ridge is 35 is what's allowed. We're at 32 and a half, and we're at 36 to that ridge point. You know, we could take the roof off completely and have a flat roof building, but we feel like we're in New England, we're in, you know, in Hamilton. And it feels like the pitched roofs give us some advantage, both visually. It also helps us hide and screen some of the equipment and so forth that would be behind, including the elevator overrun and some of the HVAC equipment. And I think, you know, my guess is when a 35-foot limit was adopted, that the expectation was they're 3-story buildings. So that's typically what you can get within 35-foot limit, especially. You have a relatively, your zoning gives credit for those who put pitched roofs on houses, so that by using the mean between the eave and the ridge, it's encouraging you to put a pitched roof on, because if we're strictly to the high point, this building would be truncated, and I don't think it would look as good as having the roof forms. And remember, the 35 or 36 feet is not at the wall of the building. We have a sloped roof, and it's well back from the actual face of the building. You're not seeing it at strict elevation as you see it in these drawings. What you do feel is the height of the wall. You know, that wall right there, which is, I think, in the range of 30 feet. About 30 feet tall. My guess is the town hall might be about that to the eave. It's kind of in that range. This section is, if you are on, I guess, Willow, looking back toward Route 1A or the Black Cow. So Railroad Avenue is off to the left. This is the building on the Timeless Interiors building, if you will. Here we are sitting here. And then our parking lot, and then we're dropping down to the lawn, and these are the abutters' houses, our best estimate on the abutters' houses on Linden. This is where I mentioned that we're proposing the new fence and an arborvitae screen in conjunction with the existing trees that are there. Part of the strategy of keeping this building quite close here and breaking up the parking lot was so that, again, was to reduce the impact here. And the septic system is basically away from those trees enough that we expect those trees can survive the installation of the septic system. If you were to walk in the, for lack of a better term, alley between the Timeless Interiors building, I'll call it 5256 Railroad, and our building, in this case heading toward Willow, you can see the relative heights, right? So if you're out here on Railroad, you can't see this building, right? This building is, even though our ridge is higher, it's sufficiently high that you won't be able to experience it. There will be peaks as you go down Railroad and look through the alley, you know, over the top of the House of Pizza. You know, you'll see bits and pieces of it, but I don't think you'll ever see this thing, you know, as this sort of large arc of a building sitting on the site. We do, you know, we're looking at some ceiling heights that are appropriate for commercial use, some not overly generous ceiling heights, 8-foot ceiling heights for the residential units, and then this sort of attic space where, again, we mentioned put some mechanical equipment, that kind of thing. So we are 32 and a half feet to that midpoint and 36 feet to the ridge from average grade at the front. One more, this is if you're driving down our driveway, this is our estimation of the folks who live on the corner of Willow and our driveway. They're up a little bit higher than we would be because you go down the driveway. Again, I mentioned, I think we're putting a fence in and some plantings and that row of trees along that line. Give you a feel of the relative scale. And then last, just some lighting. We don't want to overlight this. We don't think we need to overlight it. We have purposely put building overhangs in so the lights can be in the overhang and just come, so you just see the glow of the light, not the source of the light. We have used some bollards to sort of mark walkways, but you know, they're low height bollards. There's no light at all back in here, at all. and even the carport, it's light up in the ceiling and recessed. There'll be some spillage out, which will allow you to, folks to safely traverse the site, but not overlight it. By code, we're required to have a light at every doorway. We would use a dark sky compliant light fixture, which basically is a glare proof fixture, so it would keep the light source down low and appropriate for a residential building. And I think, thank you. And I think, Bill, I don't know if that's all I have.
Patrick, do you have some input?
Yeah, I recall that it was mentioned that a number of departments have made comments. I've given to board members comments that came from DPW, the fire department, as well as the police department. I also have done a preliminary review of the plans. I did have a few comments that I did want to make for the board and the public. This is a project that does fit the downtown business zoning as it is adopted by the town of Hamilton. The commercial and residential is clearly what downtowns are about. This is likely the first smart growth project that we've seen in the last several years. There are a lot of elements within a smart growth planning project, but as Attorney Mann had mentioned a while ago, they are to be in downtown. They are to allow people to be close to jobs, transit, commercial, retail opportunities. So there are other things that are related to that as it relates to pedestrian accessibility on-site as well as off-site, which we'll talk about through the review of the project, I'm sure. One of the important things to remember is that this is a site plan review project, which is to be done by the planning board. They are the permit granting authority. I will give you a number of site design considerations. One of the criteria for the site plan review is that projects are to respect existing landforms. You'll find that this project actually worked very hard at respecting the topography on that property. It does collect the water in that, I guess that would be the easterly edge of the property in a very important fashion. That's where they're also locating the detention area. I think that is an important element for the surrounding properties that do drain onto this site. I did notice also that the site plan keeps a lot of the existing landscape materials, particularly around the edge of the site, that helps to buffer this property from abutting properties, large trees as well as some shrubs. A lot of times also in downtown sites you will see projects crowd their individual property. However, you will notice as we look closely at the plans through the review process, less than 20% of this site is being covered by building, which is pretty rare for an urban project like this. Let's see, the design does accommodate setbacks. You may, if you are familiar with our downtown business zoning, district dimensional kinds of things, we did talk about that having a 35-foot height. You'll also notice that we don't have setback dimensions, which is pretty unusual. However, this project has cautiously set its build-in back from abutting properties in what I consider to be a pretty considerate fashion. I will notice that the fire department did expect for vehicular access to be able to turn around at the terminus of the driveway on the property. We'll likely work through that point. One of the things that we need to think about in New England is that snow storage needs to go somewhere. I don't think that global warming is here with us yet, but I can tell you that sites that don't have convenient and workable snow storage areas do see a lot of damage unless they're integrated where they're useful. I did notice on the plan that it absolutely complies with the parking requirements. As you'll recall in the discussion a while ago, it does require for parking 1 space per unit and 1 space per 300 square feet of commercial space. So the project does comply with that. I will advise you that the chief of police was concerned about parking, guest parking, those kinds of things, but again, the project does meet the requirements that the zoning sets. One of the things that makes sites work with their neighbors and work with the residents and tenants on property is having an appreciable landscape plan that really works. I think this has a robust plan with a lot of planting. It also does select a lot of native vegetation, which is another element of smart growth planning. So those plants have a good chance at sustaining themselves on the property and are vigorous over time. So I applaud that. Let's see. One of the things that our site plan review does like to see is what's called low-impact development techniques within the design plan, and several have been incorporated in the site, from the landscape design to respecting the topography, to working with the existing vegetation, working with the existing access. A number of those kinds of things could be considered to be low-impact development, which I think certainly gives the project points. One of the things that I had mentioned is that for smart growth projects to comply with all of the elements of smart growth planning is that they relate well from a pedestrian standpoint to properties around them, particularly as it connects to the T, to retail, commercial, jobs, schools, etc. I have been advised that there are certain properties around the perimeter of the property that folks definitely like their privacy, want to keep it, and we would want to make sure that there's pedestrian accessibility, but that it respects folks' individual properties and their privacy. So look forward to seeing that applied to the property. So those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Take questions from the board
yeah.
first.
I'm sorry. Charlie, I've got questions for you, please. I think they're for you anyway. On drawing number 2, it shows the test pits, and then there are TPWs. What are the TPWs? They're the same drawing type thing.
Yeah, I have to, do you know what the,
Yeah, the W's are the newer test pits that were done in 2019. And those, I actually added those to the revised plan set.
Okay. May have it
Weren't
on,
the original submittal.
okay. I'm looking at the big chart, and I see the test pit TP3 and 4 and so on,
Yep,
but I don't see the TPWs, so.
I can make sure that you guys get those. They're on the,
Is it on the little one that, it's not in our package. Okay.
yeah.
I haven't looked through the little one. Okay, that's fine. The water seepage or weeping observed and standing water observed dimensions. What's the minimum acceptable for standing water, and what's the minimum acceptable for the weeping observed, please?
those are not minimum standards, those are just where they're observed.
No, I know that, but I mean, if when you're doing that, you got these numbers listed. Let's say, like number 1, standing water observed at 72 inches, that's 6 feet. So if you started seeing standing water at 1 foot, would you then reject construction at the site because it's too high or something like that? That's what I'm looking for.
No, I mean, at the time the testing is done, they're just strictly observations, and you're just observing where you see them.
Okay.
Then, because you don't know what you're going to build yet when you're doing the test. The test is to gather information about where that groundwater is, and then when you understand where the groundwater is, then you design to that. So you don't now in the one thing that you could reject and this is only in a Title V. This isn't necessarily for designing drainage, but under Title V for the design of septic systems, and I think this may be a direct quote. You have to have 4 feet of naturally occurring pervious material. If you have less than that, then that's a failed test pit.
Okay.
But that's not tied to the groundwater. The groundwater could be up or down, and could if you have a higher groundwater, you just mound the system. So the depth.
You what?
You mound the system. In other words,
The septic system.
The septic system has to be 4 feet
Okay,
above
so,
the groundwater.
so what you're saying, given these levels, you then choose the materials you're gonna use for your building. You know how high it can be, and that sets a standard for what you're gonna do for the building. Is that correct? Am I getting it correct?
Yeah, I mean, we work together, as a team with the architect. They have an understanding that we need to design a septic system and we need to design a drainage facility. And so we did some preliminary, in fact, we did many preliminary sketches where we were trying to figure out what was the right balance between the size of the building, and because the larger the building, the more septic you have. The larger the building, the less opportunity you have to deal with the drainage, and plus there's there's balance that goes on. So we went through any number of different concepts, and it's really kind of more art than it is science, and it's back and forth. When you can get an engineer and an architect to talk to each other, that's always a good thing.
Okay. Okay, so basically I have to assume then that these are pretty good readings that you got for your observations.
Well, again, they're just observations. Yeah, I mean, yes. A builder would look at that and say, "Hey, sandy soils." Yes, that to a builder would say, "Yeah, I can put septic systems in here all day long."
Yeah.
As opposed to digging up clay. Now, if you're a potter, then that's great. And clay is good, but you can't put septic systems in clay. So, yeah. But in the very next breath, you can put septic systems in a lot of different soils. It has to be pretty bad soil not to be able to put a
But
septic
this is pretty good soil.
This
for
is
septic for
very,
a
very
building.
porous
Yeah,
material.
okay,
yes.
that's what I thought. Wait a second. there's no cellar in this building, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's basically what my questions were. I got an observation too. One of the plants you're putting in is a sugar maple. What's the potential? It's a pretty young sugar maple, I think, from looking at okay. Maybe that would be,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's for you or not, but if we get global warming, my understanding is the sugar maples in this area will probably disappear.
I sure hope not.
I know.
There are,
It's a concern because I will go to a sanctuary and we do sugaring and, this whole thing could go away. And I'm wondering if you're putting in a plant that's going to disappear in potentially a
that would
reasonable
be-
number
that
of
would be a
years.
sad day
And
if
they
it
are
does
slow
happen.
growing.
Yeah.
yeah, it was picked for a particular purpose. There are already 4 sugar maples, and there are these 4 as you first come in on the left, on the driveway. And it's a columnar sugar maple which grows tight, fairly
Yeah,
tight.
yeah,
right?
fairly compact. It's fairly pear-shaped.
And it's coming in at, 3 to 3.5 inch caliper, so it's probably a 8, 10, 12 foot tall,
Yeah.
tree. And, the color's good, it's good for birds. That's why it was chosen. Our thinking was basically that the folks who live here, looking across would be looking,
Yeah,
was
it's a-
tall enough that they see a
yeah.
nice line of trees rather than the side of Max.
I'm not trying to be critical. I'm actually concerned because I believe there is global warming, and I think we're in a serious problem here in this area. We're gonna lose all our sugar maples.
Well, we'll look into that, and I'm not trying to be defensive. But
No,
I
no,
know
no.
Species of plant,
No, I think they're gorgeous trees.
Yeah, a Bradford pear would work here just as well, just
Yeah.
as effectively, and things like that. Even a little leaf linden might work. So I'll take your comment. We'll go back and talk to the horticultural expert types and see if there's an alternative or whether they think the sugar maple.
Yeah,
this-
I'm not an
this
expert,
species
so I
may be
just-
different,
yeah.
because of it's not just traditional
Right.
sugar maple, I guess. That's
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's it. Thank you.
Bill, do you have?
I have a couple of questions. Usually a petitioner before the board is what, for want of better words, I would describe as a real developer. Somebody who's going to build units, sell them, rent them, manage them. In this case, the petitioner is the Hamilton Development Corporation, who has no such intention. So I would ask the attorney here, perhaps, whatever plans are approved here, as I understand it, are probably going to be shopped around, right? They're going to see who among a body of real developers actually wants to pay the Hamilton Development Commission real money to build. We don't really know. They could be $500,000 condominiums. They could be $1,200 a month market rent housing, or it could be Chapter 40B affordable housing. That any developer will look at these and sort of say, can I work with this? Can I build these, make them a little more luxurious, a little less luxurious? So it's a little bit of a sort of not knowing what we're actually getting. We're getting that structure, okay? But if the petitioner was a real developer, we'd also know what his plans are for what type of housing he's going to build and how expensive it's going to be and who the target audience is and so on. But in this case, we don't really know. It's just a point of uncertainty that when you deal with a real developer, you know exactly what he intends to do. Here we have an entity, the Hamilton Development Corporation, who's seeking approval for some plans that they in turn are going to put out on the marketplace and say, we're taking bids. We have approvals for 18 units and it looks like this. Who wants to pay us money to actually fill them out?
Bill,
So-
can't we put conditions on that the real owner who comes has to come back to
I'm not sure, maybe the attorney, I'm not sure we can
That's what
actually do that.
Well,
actually,
but,
let's kick
but,
that
but what
around.
I'm saying is there's just a considerable degree of uncertainty about what the actual occupancy of this is going
What's
to
the
be.
teeth in this site plan review that we're approving?
Sure. So essentially, the teeth in any site plan review is that you, by law, under Section 40A, are only entitled to regulate the exterior. You cannot regulate the interior
Use.
of any property. That's just Section 3. You're not entitled to do that. Real developer, any developer. So what I would say, though, however, is you are captured as far as what you are able to do because you have 600 square foot units. We absolutely know the audience. The audience is going to be empty nesters, young people who come back to Hamilton. We will get people who are the product of, a termination of a relationship, so it'll be a single person potentially. People who are left alone, who would come back, who want to stay within the town. That's going to be the typical market that really is being targeted. And I represent a tremendous number of developers, and I can tell you that is what this particular property will generate an interest in. Relative to how do the furnishings or the fixtures or the fit-ups, what are they going to be like? They'll be pretty traditional. They'll be, nice product, but it's still a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom unit. So you don't have, a 6-bedroom home here where you're going to literally put in, 20-foot ceilings, a great room, la la la. It's limited. So you do know what you're going to get in that vein. And how the site plan approval would work is you simply ensure that we provide for any kind of mitigation for impacts that surround us. That's why. So the purpose of this particular venue is to ensure, as Mr. Ruffett had said, that when we come in, we do so in a thoughtful manner. Charlie, April, and I, and Krista, and Thad all have a tremendous amount of experience in development, and we can tell you that what we're trying to do is a thoughtful approach to the project, and you can condition us on additional thoughtful approaches. So, for example, you brought up the point, you can't put pedestrian crosswalks if you're going to impact people. So we have tried to, we actually eliminated one crossing where we were going across to the back and accessing over to a business, and the business said, listen, we're a little uncomfortable with that because, we don't know who's going to come across. We don't know if somebody's going to get hurt. We'd prefer you not to have open reign, and we respected that and understand it completely, and we eliminated that. We do have walking paths that would allow these people who would live here and people who come from railroad to come in and access near where I don't have a pointer, but where Thad can point, where the municipal lot is, and then these people can easily, if they so chose, come down around, walk around, and then go down to downtown. So to address Mr. Wheaton's point, is there an element of I guess unpredictability? The site is pretty controlling, so there really isn't that much of an issue. Relative to the price point, most projects are based on square footage. They're not, you'll have a variant, but it's not the difference between a 40B. This is not a 40B. This is not an affordable component. This will not be one. It is a market value project.
How do you
End of
know?
story.
How do you know?
Oh, I can pretty much tell you.
How do you know somebody won't come in and say, I would like to have, 10 of these, to 20% minimum, whatever it is, be affordable rental units?
I have to ask you, developers in general.
That doesn't necessarily bother me. I'm just saying that you.
Because it isn't. Because simply it isn't. There is no benefit to doing that, so there won't be.
Oh, there's a lot of benefit.
There is
Well,
none.
part of the answer to the question that he's asking is, in reality, this was all discussed in the planning board meeting at least 1, 2, or 3 meetings ago, in that the whole purpose of doing this is to have a permitted process in place so that when a developer comes in, he knows he doesn't have to go through this whole process. He can go, I'm going to say, pretty straight to construction, not necessarily, but at the same time, it is possible to get changes to the permit, to ask for changes to the permit. Canterbrook Estates has done that several times already. So this is really a non-issue, This is a marketing, the whole purpose of this is to market this property, to get it sold as reasonably quickly as possible, and to get a project going on this as reasonably quick as possible, with a lot of, without a lot of.
Let me mention my second
wait.
concern. I was in the middle of talking about my points.
I know that, but
So
I'm
let
answering your
me
point.
finish my points. So addressing to the attorney once again, you mentioned that this project is completely in conformity with the zoning ordinance changes as of 2016. I went and looked at them, and they allow 2+ apartments on top of a commercial development. You certainly are doing that here. You've got 16,400 square feet of residential use, and you've managed to shoehorn in 2,000 square feet of commercial use, which you admit you're not quite sure what it's really doing there. But what it's doing is it's making the residential project legal.
Oh, I never said I didn't know what it was doing
let me, before you respond, let me make a couple other points. I remember very distinctly in the initial enabling legislation that we passed, ordinances for the downtown business district and the Hamilton Development Corporation as being one of trying to promote commercial development for our tax base, and that the original legislation allowed 1 apartment on top of a commercial use. And then, I went back and I looked at the 2016, post-2016, and there, my God, it changed all of a sudden from 1 to 2+.
Mm-hmm.
That's like an enormous change in zoning. So I went back through the minutes of the town meeting.
This is not relative to.
Well, what I'm saying,
No, it's not.
what I'm saying, hold on, let me just, I won't be too long, that perhaps we should ask our town attorney to look again at the minutes of that meeting and say where there was an explicit discussion of changing the zoning bylaw from allowing 1 apartment on top of a business to allowing any limited number of apartments on top of a business. I agree that that's what the law says now.
Well, I read
But
the minutes.
I have no recollection in the minutes that that was a legal change to the town bylaws.
Bill, it's
Okay.
irrelevant. The
Yeah.
bylaw stands, and it was voted in by town meeting.
Okay.
If we want to change that bylaw, take it to town meeting. We cannot do that now. We are here for site plan review.
Right. The other part of the problem is, this was discussed in planning board meeting before this meeting. Why are you waiting till today to bring this up? And why are you being obstructionist?
It wasn't discussed.
Huh? It was discussed. We knew exactly what this was gonna be. We knew exactly what was gonna be involved. We knew that it was gonna be mixed use. We knew all this stuff. We knew why it was being done. I mean, if I know it, surely somebody who is 10 times brighter than me should know it.
Okay,
And I
thanks,
don't get
guys.
it.
Peter, do you have something? No, not, we'll call on the audience when we're done with our internal discussion. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off so quickly.
Okay, so my questions are quite simple. There was originally a cut-through to the train, and I think you gave that up, and you're now planting it out of the way and so forth, so that people can't cut through.
No, so where it was, Mr. Clark, is we had a cut-through up at the top.
Yeah.
But upon
bridge,
subsequent
so to speak.
discussions with the bank,
Mm-hmm.
we were asked not to put the cut-through onto their property. They would prefer us not to do that. So what we do still have is a cut-through at the front. Can you highlight for Mr. Clark? So,
Yeah.
at the very front of the property, see where
Of course,
there's
we know that.
we can actually cut through there to get to the train station in that fashion, and that is through the municipal lot, and then we are not otherwise infringing on the rights of a private landowner, which is what the bank is. And we
Well, I
are
was
asked to-
going to ask you whether the driveway, which is shared by the bank and the cow, whether that driveway is considered owned by one of them and therefore prohibited, because it could be simply something you could walk through and.
Again, Mr. Clark, I don't disagree. However, it is privately owned, and we have to respect the rights of the private owners and are not being allowed to cut through.
Okay. Second question had to do with snow falling off the roof. And the architects might just talk about, is that impossible, or?
It's a fair point. I'd say a couple of things about that residential real estate.
The roof pitches are relatively shallow, so you won't,
Yep.
it's not a very steep roof. It's an asphalt shingle roof which has some texture.
That could
Oh, yeah, I'm
we have
sorry.
you
Can you-
speak to a microphone?
Come here, Thad.
Here, pick up this one.
Thank you.
Take it.
Oh, Canon. Shallow, fairly shallow roof pitches, asphalt shingle roofs, fair bits of texture. Given that, for example, this section of the building here is over a walkway, would have gutters and so forth, which would arrest the snow and ice from falling. Anywhere there's an entrance, of course, would have some protection from snow and ice falling. I would not expect there to be, like it's not like a metal roof or a steep pitched roof where you might get an avalanche of snow, Mr.
All right,
Clark.
so I'm just bringing it up, so it's on your checklist.
Yes, sir.
The compatibility of Mac's building, is it integrated in any way into the kind of commercial that will be here, or is Mac's going to be a residential, or?
Max is going to remain commercial, and it's going to be integrated in terms of support systems, so we will actually eliminate its non-conforming and failed septic system so that it will actually be
I
connected to
heard
this new
that, yeah.
system. And, if the developer who comes in will actually acquire it, so there is potential to do a facelift to it. But at this point, it is resident, I apologize, it is commercial, and it
Yeah.
has to remain so.
Okay, because I think there were some plans at one time that it had historical significance and might be of interest to the history club or whatever you call it.
Sure. It most certainly is not going to change substantially, Mr. Clark, and it's not going to be raised.
Okay. And just the overflow parking.
Sure.
Is there, I'm not sure where, when they put on a big, let's say a party in somebody's apartment or something, where is the extra parking?
Sure. The extra part, so they're on-site, typically if they're going to have the parking, they're going to have a party, it's going to be in the evening or on a holiday, so that particular enterprise will be closed, and then the parking spaces, the additional 8 parking spaces will be available.
Yep.
In addition to that, as does everybody in residential neighborhoods, they'll probably park over in the commercial lot when there's a big party, like maybe there's a big, Thanksgiving party, maybe somebody would park in the commercial lot. But again, these units are very small, so they don't lend well to.
Yeah, parties.
No, it'd be
Right.
more similar to what you'd have in, I guess, a city kind of apartment where you have 5, 6, 7 people.
Yep. Okay, those were the only things that I had.
I don't have any questions at this time, but other than to Patrick, we can do a third-party engineering review if we're requested, right?
Yes.
Okay. We'll now open it up to the public. I ask that you guys be respectful of everybody, each other, and also only, we would prefer if you don't repeat the same question over and over again, so as we're not here till midnight. And when you do have your questions, please step up to the microphone, state your name, your address, and ask your question. So do we have Miss?
Julia Maycock, 62 Willow Street, right across the street, right across from the driveway.
I'm sorry, what was your name, please?
Julia Maycock, 62 Willow Street, literally across the street.
I know who you are and where you live, I just don't know your name.
Okay, it's Julia. I'm just wondering, I just heard something new tonight, I'm a little concerned about it, which is that the buffer, which is Mac's property, is that going to be sold to the developer? And is there a promise that they're going to keep that there? Because what I've heard throughout all the HDC meetings is that that property will in fact be kept by, maybe I made the wrong assumption, but I thought it was going to be kept by the town somehow. But if you sell it to developer, is it going to be with a condition that they maintain that? Because it is not a historical property, and we all know that. It's not under the historical commission or anything like that. So I want to know what protections there are for keeping that in place, because there have been constant promises about that. And now if you tell me you're going to sell it to developer, I don't think they're bound by that. Maybe you can tell me.
Jill.
There's every intention to retain Max. I don't know what else to say. There's every intention to retain Max, and it is being conveyed. It's part of the property, and we need to actually share services, so it will be. Will it be maintained? Yes, just like any other property in town, it's supposed to be maintained, and will be.
And any changes to the site plan approval
come back
will
here.
have to come back in here. So if the developer comes in with a different plan.
Exactly, Mr. Ham, I apologize, yes, we cannot make any change to the actual site or to the property without coming into this board and being subjected to a site plan review.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I'm Russ Tanzer, 100 Orton's Road. I represent and am the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust here in town. Bill, good point, mentioning what might happen with the 40B down the road. I understand that this is going to be market rate. There is some inclusionary housing here that needs to be considered, whether this is rental or goes for sale. I want everybody to be aware that from the Affordable Housing Trust's position, we want to be remembered as this gets permitted.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, I'm Martha Driscoll, and I live at 85 Linden Street. And I just have a couple of points that I'd like to make. One, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Wheaton's concern. My understanding, and I know this is not an issue and I won't dwell on it, but I understand that right now, that whole issue about the bylaw and the zoning change is now with the Hamilton town lawyer, and they are re-reviewing it. So there may be some subjectivity to whether or not that was actually done compliantly. I don't know. I've just heard this, and I think it's something that we should pursue, because if there is some issue that that bylaw was changed without compliance, then we, and there can only be one apartment above, then we have another issue. So I think we need to investigate that further, because I've been told that it's with our town attorney right now. I just learned this. I have no other information, but I would like to pursue that. Two, I do think that you guys have been great. You've met with us. You've taken a lot of considerations of the neighbors with fencing and lighting and whatever, but we still have amazing amount of traffic. The amount of traffic is going to increase coming out of this little road going on to Willow Street, which is two ways, which you have Railroad, which is only one way, and now you have Willow, which is two, and Linden, which is two. The traffic since we moved there when Railroad was two ways was much less than that corner. I live right on the corner of Willow and Linden, and that is a very dangerous corner as it is. And when the snow falls, that snowbank goes up by that street sign 5 feet, whatever winter we have, right? It becomes a very dangerous corner. Adding in more traffic, I think, is a concern. The high density, we keep showing this nice little lot, it's an acre lot, compared to this massive amount of land that has many, many houses surrounding it. Those houses have 2-4 people in it, not 18 units that are either a 1-bedroom, which easily 2 people, or a 2-bedroom. That's a lot more density than the little units. I think we're all on 10,000 square feet. So you take that, that's a big increase in density. The light issue, you guys are accommodating, but it's still going to increase the light pattern in a very small space. I mean, we're only talking about an acre, and you have lights going around up and down, which you need to do, but you just got to understand the impact of a residential neighborhood. And we already have a lighting issue. We have the mobile gas station. We've got the beautiful lighthouse on top of the yellow building behind us. I mean, there's a lot of light going on in a very small area. Safety, I am very concerned about. We have a lot of new families coming into the neighborhood. There's a lot of kids around. You're going to have the increased traffic. It's a concern. Noise, that's going to be a major increase going on. People are coming in and out, cars, garages, doors, whatever. Believe it or not, after the weather vane closes down, it gets a little quiet there. The septic issue, I have a lot of questions with. And I understand that you guys have done a very thorough job and you've done your testing in 2017, and fortunately you did again in 2019. But like, how big is that permeable depth? Is it just this much permeable, or do we have a big depth of permeable? How many places did you actually do the testing? Like, for us just to understand that you came in and did the testing and it's great and passed by the town, maybe you could give us a little more information on that so we can understand that it meets all those standards that, you know.
Charlotte, can you speak in the microphone when you answer?
I can answer the very.
Yeah,
Come on to the mic.
you to speak in the microphone.
Charlie, come here.
The,
Right here.
Specifically that question, it's just easily answered, so I might as well answer. That information is all on the plans that we have filed. Where the testing was, the depth, the soils we found, and that information has all been filed.
Okay, so we can just go to town hall and they'll give us copies? Or do we have to buy them, or?
Give me your email and I'll send them to
Okay,
you.
that would be great.
Sure.
Parking, you know, apparently you're meeting the bare minimum requirements, but as you say, if people come visit, you know, the pictures you showed, I think, were very accurate. That municipal lot has 12 spaces. What is it, Monday? No. When do we have the Accord pickup?
Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Okay, so Wednesday, Thursday twice, and Saturday mornings. We have a lot of people coming in that they need to park there to access the Accord Food Pantry. That lot is never empty. You also have the commercial building next to you, the yellow building. They have all their businesses in there as well. There is no flow over from what you want to do to go into that municipal lot. That's just not realistic. That's something we need to do, because every morning I have people who are parking on the commuter rail. I shouldn't say every morning, that's an exaggeration. There have been times where people park in front of my house on Linden Street in order to go to the train. So we're just going to increase that opportunity of people parking on Willow Street, Linden Street, Railroad Ave down the way. It's just, it's going to be a reality of a problem. And again, safety, traffic, danger. You know, and I'm not saying we can't do this. I know that it's going to happen. We just want to make sure it's done right. You know, that's where we're at. And I just think these are considerations that need to have a little bit more thought behind them, because they're a reality. So I think that's really all I have to say, which was quite a lot.
Thank you.
Could I ask Patrick,
Yes, go ahead.
have we had traffic reviewed by the chief of police and those people that control the flow of traffic in different areas?
When I asked the police department if they had comments about that, they told me that they didn't feel like it was of large enough size to create an issue. They were more concerned about parking.
But the parking meets the bylaw as it's written today. If you're going to ask any more questions, you need to
I
stand.
think she's convinced me that the traffic pattern generated from that site and going to that site is a big change. And it ought to be reviewed by our traffic people.
The traffic safety officer, Matt Donovan, did look at the plans. He did, he was reminded of the number of units that were being proposed. He's the guy. And he said he didn't.
Could we get a letter from him that he says it's?
I'll ask him again.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you get his contact information so we can give him our concern?
He's at the Hamilton Police Department. Feel free.
So when you mentioned that he didn't think it was a big enough issue to spend the money to do a traffic study, or big enough issue to even have concern to look into it on his own?
Well, this is information that came to me from the police chief. The police chief asked Matt Donovan about traffic concerns, consideration about this project and that location. And he advised the chief that he saw no issues at that location.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Is that something we can have the third-party engineer review also? I mean, they're just gonna do a quick trip study.
Yeah, it's possible. The board probably needs to vote tonight to require that the applicant provide the town with resources for us to be able to hire a third party.
Is that something the applicant is
yes.
willing to do?
So do we have 53G, or just want us to fund it?
We do have 53G. It is a requirement as part of the bylaw.
Yeah, we absolutely have no issue. If there's a peer review that the board would like us to undertake, we'll do so. I will tell you that the project with regard to an 18 unit project will not raise muster with any of the traffic reports because of the number of people in and out. It's a very minimal, if any, impact, but that's all a traffic engineer will tell you. We can do that, and it can be done by a traditional engineer.
Agree. So, can I get a motion for?
So is it, wait, before, I'll make the motion, but is this a peer review motion, or is this to
Peer review motion.
a peer review motion? Okay, I move that the Hamilton Planning Board request that the
Petitioner, sure.
petitioner provide a peer review to study traffic control problems and give us a report.
Right, when you come up with the quote, just let me know, and I'll.
All right, thank you.
I second
Well, we
that.
have the motion, we have to vote on it.
I've seconded it.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can I ask one question too? Will the scope be, I assume the scope is going to be the stormwater, confirmation of that, and then also, I guess, a traffic impact report? I just am trying to identify what the scope would be of that third-party review.
Stormwater and traffic impact, I think. Is
Period. Okay, I just want to confirm. Thank you. I mean, it's,
Parking complies to our bylaw already. So there'll be traffic impact.
The traffic impact would take into account people parking on the streets, though,
no.
making traffic that much more difficult.
No, the town, you can ask the town to do a full impact of the whole neighborhood.
Is there public parking on the street, or is it prohibited? Is it no parking signs?
It's allowed.
It is, okay. All right, I just was curious, I just didn't know.
But there's certain limits, like, we've gotten advised by the police that in front of our house, we cannot park from the hydrant across the street to the corner of Willow because it's obstructed.
Yeah.
But there's no law or signage or anything that says that, but you can get a little, and, they're very nice about it. They give you a little note, please don't do this, and it's reality. I mean, people coming out of Willow and taking a left onto Linden, if that spot is obstructed, it's a danger zone because people coming down on Linden, it can cause.
Linden's such a massive cut through too, so.
Where's the hydrant there?
There's two.
Across the street?
There's one right on Willow, that's on one end of our property, and then there's the other ones on the other side of Linden by the, across the street.
Thank you.
All right. If we don't have any more, do we have any more questions?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to follow up, Mr. Hack.
Can you repeat your name again, please?
Julia Maycock. You just mentioned that town could do a parking study. How do we request that? Because I live there, all these folks live there, and we know what it's like, and this will impact the neighborhood dramatically. We just, heard that we already have the answer about what their study's going to say. So I'm wondering if we could get a study for the town to look at the traffic
Yeah,
impact.
reach out to your selectman.
Okay. I'll do that.
There's,
One quick thing, it was touched upon, but not, Tony Passaretti, 85 Linden Street. With the fire department and whatever they're going to do to make it so the vehicle can turn around, does that mean all that pavement has to expand?
At this point, I just would refrain from comment until I actually talk to the fire department. The intent is not to increase any impervious areas or to further have hot tops, so I just need to wait to talk to the fire chief, because many times with properties like this, they simply want to be able to back up and turn around. So if I may, I promise that you'll have an answer at the next hearing. We'll show you exactly what we're going to do.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Sorry.
So, I'm Guy DeFeo, 45 Willow Street. So maybe rephrasing this question, I know the parking, you meet the zoning laws, but how are you going to restrict if 3 people live in a 2-bedroom apartment and have 3 cars? How's that, where are all those cars going to go? Because there's going to be more than 18 people living there, and they're going to have cars. So where are those cars going to be?
Good point.
Fortunately, you can't do that. The zoning bylaw requires 1 per unit. I'm sorry, but that's the case.
I understand.
So there's
Not
one,
an answer, though.
there's only 1 car per unit? That's the requirement?
The zoning bylaw requires 1 parking space per car, and I will tell you that sometimes in neighborhoods like this in particular, some people don't even have cars. But I can't tell you that. I can only tell you we satisfy the requirement and that we do have 8 extra spaces for the commercial project, so the commercial portion. So overnight, there is availability of parking. We have more than most people as far as square footage goes.
So I understand the overnight, but that's not really a concern. It's during the day. And if these people are all taking the train, their cars are gonna be there. Yeah, it's just a problem that is a reality that, yeah, you may meet the requirements of zoning, and I know that's all you need to do. But if you come down Lindy Street and then go onto Willow Street during the day, it is completely jam-packed cars on the side of the street.
There's nothing I can do about the current condition of the road, but I can tell you we comply, and that's all I can
Thank
say.
you. So, if there's no other comments, can we get a motion to continue the hearing to?
Sure, I move that we continue the hearing.
Second.
Next meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
What's the?
Aye.
We have to actually announce it for the.
The date is November 19th,
At 7 p.m. again, Mr. Ham?
7 p.m. Is that accurate?
That's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
great project.
At this point, I'll turn the chairman back over to Brian.
Excellent.
Very good. Nice to see you.
You bet.
We left the house. It's still, there's only one thing that doesn't work well with the house. I can't figure out, the fireplaces sort of imperfectly draw. And they were designed with all sorts of fancy things in a Hearst house to make sure they would. It's still kind of like having lived in an old house where the fireplaces. Exactly.
Good job.
Oh, yeah, we sold it like 2 years ago.
See you, Minnie.
Long, painful process. But everything really works very well. Liz has had a ball, outfitting the place with all those windows. It's totally, and Tim, can't speak highly enough about Tim. I think he's retired now.
That was great. He
built another house out on Argillo right after ours, and maybe one other, and then he's faded out. I still call him. I will also say, the other thing I'll say is that the geothermal works flawlessly. So the people that did it, want to reference Achieve Renewable. They're in Beverly.
Good to know.
They and I can still call them up. Some question, they always get right back to me, and I haven't had a thing go wrong with it.
We're doing this old house thing episode in Manchester, and the conflict of geothermal. So that's why we have not been able to sell that to too many folks.
Well, the cost benefit is so out of whack. I mean, the payback is forever.
Well, when we did it, we had this outrageous tax credit, which made the, and furthermore, when you, we had an attorney look at it. When you build a new house, right, you can take the whole HVAC bill, including all the ductwork, and write that off. Well, that gives you just a gigantic tax relief.
Trying to do otherwise.
Right.
We had somebody try to drill some wells up from the property of Marblehead right on the Swampscott line.
That's all it is.
Through the roof, right?
Well, they couldn't, the drill rig got blown out of those.
Well, so what, I think it worked in our place because they put the two downdrafts for the geo.
Nice to be back.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to stick around for the rest of
So,
the
Richard, you remember at our MAPC MVP thing, the guy says to us, you can expect by 2100, if current weather continues as it is,
So,
we'll have the
Brian,
climate of North Carolina.
What kind of conditions do you make the sale?
North Carolina has maples from
Someone who
one
buys
side
it
to the other.
has to comply with
Yeah.
the site plan.
Of course, so that's a standard one, yeah.
You know, we're used to, as Bill says, we're used to having the developer come.
Yeah, this
and
isn't
talk
that
to us.
uncommon though. But I know it's more common. Of course. but-
No, I get it.
Well, they'll have to comply with the plan or they make changes and have to come back.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm more worried about the lobsters and oysters.
It was also supposed to be sort of a sideline.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Good job.
Thank you.
I didn't see any sweat dripping off.
Never let him see you sweat.
You did good. Your first chairmanship. Pro tem.
All right, next up is master planning. I know, Patrick, you had a couple comments you wanted to make.
Yes, thank you, Brian. The town manager, and I know Jennifer Goldson, wants to get this finished up. That being, and there are two moving parts here. One thing that I need to do with the board tonight, if you have any comments on the master plan document, I need to hear that now or forever hold your peace, because I need to get that into the comments that Jennifer will deal with. So,
So by now, you mean right now, or do you mean the end of the week?
yeah, right now.
Well,
Moment.
there
Yeah.
were, in the minutes, there was a lot of discourse when we tried to review. So maybe you can turn that over to them, but it seemed like the consultants really didn't meet the needs of the planning board.
So I need you to be specific with me, Peter.
Look at the minutes.
Yeah,
it
they're
was a long
kind of.
discussion. And I think Bill and
Well,
Rick and
I was specific in that the housing production plan recommendations need to be integrated into the housing master plan.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I
Make
was
it more
concerned about, that we had all this, surveys, which are wonderful, and demographics and some economic analysis. But as I said, when I went to the housing production plan meeting, I was a bit surprised to see that had specific recommendations regarding zoning bylaws, the Great Estates bylaw, the Open Space Farmland Preservation bylaw, and maybe one other. So that would be logically, if they're recommending that there be zoning changes, those ought to be in the housing master plan as opposed to the house. They certainly could be in the housing production plan, but they'd be better
Sure.
suited in the, so.
Yeah, you might recall the biggest concern I had about both documents is the fact that they made recommendations on sites for creation of units, and they didn't make any sort of qualitative comments regarding a site that's eminently workable versus another site which is eminently complex. And they made no sort of qualification between the two. And to me, making a recommendation where two communities have to declare surplus of a school and go through all of the process to declare a property workable, developable, to create affordable housing. That's just, to me, it's unfair to the public to expect them to understand that without some narrative that gives them an idea of what is being suggested.
I got the impression that their location of different houses, different types of housing around the town, was largely based on those public forums where people played little games about where they would like to put this kind of house and and they sort of tried to coalesce those opinions and say, well, we ought to put high density here and low density there or whatever, without any consideration about whether those parts of town were feasible or whatever, whether any of those areas were, either from an engineering point of view or an economic point of view feasible. It was just where people would like to see it.
or even available.
Or available.
Right.
That's another overriding thing.
They took those kinds of comments, put them in a bag, and that's the bag of recommendations relative to sites.
Right. There was no screening or reality screening.
Right.
So
I mean, I don't mind having
they
that in there somehow, but when they
need to be generic,
they need to be generic, and they shouldn't be like
site specific.
right. Well, right. Some things shouldn't be site specific. You're right.
Or if they're going to be site specific, then they ought to say, however, this will require substantial, future.
Right.
What's the word I want is political
Pipe
and
dream?
zoning related changes to accomplish this, including 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just sort of go, okay, so that is a big, long-term project as opposed to, just pass a zoning bylaw and you're off.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I think having, a caveat in there, footnote, whatever you want to call it, asterisk, about certain sites like that, saying this is, would be great for, take Winthrop, it would be great for the downtown eventually, but this is a 10 to 20 year, type of endeavor that, requires, approval on many, many fronts.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I think the caveat's important. We don't necessarily have to take it out completely, but just have a huge caveat in there.
Yeah.
I agree.
You have my original memo. Well, it's very detailed about the, assumed students in each type of housing, and I
Yes.
just really did not like the fiscal impact.
Did you send that around? I read in the minutes you did, but I didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I sent that
You can
around.
send, you can send it.
I'll send it again.
Okay.
So, that's fine.
Okay.
Good. Associated things to that. I need to have the planning board members do a couple of things regarding the housing production plan. The Department of Housing and Communities and Development requires that the local Board of Selectmen or City Council or whatever, and the planning board vote in support of that document before it can go to the state Secretary of Housing in order for them to review it. So.
What is
I need-
in a production plan? What we
the
wish would happen,
production
what we
plan-
think is going to happen, what we,
Yes, yes.
yes, yes.
There's a lot of overlap with the master plan.
Okay.
You add to that a lot of the requirements that the state imposes relative to 40B within that document, what their expectations are relative to 40B, where we are at, how much is remaining, those kinds of things.
Right. And what we're looking to develop each year for affordable housing.
Right.
Number of
Okay.
units.
It's an
So,
aspirational document.
Yeah.
Okay.
the town manager would like the planning board to have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen on the 18th of November to vote on the document. So that gives us
That's
no
the day
meetings
before,
in
yeah.
between, but
Right.
I think by association, we have talked about it a fair amount.
So do you want the entire board there?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
That's the Monday before our
Okay,
next
before our
meeting.
next meeting.
that's right. Double duty.
Has anybody generated a set of numbers for what our 40B deficiency is and how,
Oh, yeah.
how long?
It's all,
Okay.
it's all in there. Oh, yeah.
That's on
It's in there.
It would be a good idea for people to read the
Yeah.
report, so
Yep.
Okay.
if you have questions or
It's your
wanna make
religion.
some points. I
You-
do have a question, can I make?
Go right ahead.
Do we have any printed copies of, or printed and bound copies of the housing master plan?
Not yet. She hasn't completed it
Okay.
yet. They're waiting on
Do we
our
have a
final
do we have a
comments.
number that we're going to get from them, like 25 or 50 or?
You know what? I don't recall but I do recall they had $600 for printing.
Okay, because we ought to have a copy, I'd like to distribute copies to all the selectmen,
Sure.
to the Affordable Housing Trust, to any other people, to the library. I can almost guarantee you, many people have not read it. They've
Yes.
seen bits and heard pieces of it, but in talking with people that should have read it, it's clear that they're making comments that aren't supported by the documentation. So I think it would be helpful. Doesn't mean that they'll read it, but it will be, at least, they'll be.
It's a help.
It will be given to them so they have the opportunity to become informed.
Sure.
Great.
So, let's see. You can find the housing production plan. Go to the town's website. Go to the Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust. And go to its page. And there's, right under mission statement, there's a 3-line paragraph. And in that little paragraph, it has the new draft housing production plan that I've reviewed. Door Fox also reviewed it. The Affordable Housing Trust reviewed it as well. So that's the draft document that we're working with. That's what, the board will be asked to vote on that meeting on the 18th. Let me know if anybody needs a hard copy. I'll have someone print it for you.
How many pages is it, Patrick?
I think it's like 70-something, 72 maybe. My memory
Of course,
serves.
we
If
don't
you're
know.
making copies, I'll take one.
I want one, please.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
We don't know where we're going to show up on the agenda, right?
With something like this, they like to get it out of the way earlier rather than later, so
So hopefully we
I
won't be
will
sitting-
make that request
Yes,
for you.
hopefully we won't be
that'd
sitting
be
around
nice.
for an hour and a half.
That'd be nice. Okay. You good on that?
I'm good on that.
Right.
Could I report something?
Sure. Can we do minutes and then you can do
Sure.
a report? Yeah.
Right.
So we've got a number of sets of minutes, September 24th. I was not here for that meeting, so I'll abstain from it, but anybody have any comments on that? Do you want to make a motion?
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes of September 24th, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain. Got October 1st.
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes for October 1st, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yes.
Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes for October 15th, 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I don't think I was here.
Says you were.
Okay, I'll vote no.
Well, that was a quick one.
I looked
Okay.
at that.
So you had an update,
No,
Peter?
that,
Yeah.
that, October 15th.
I sit on this committee, which is called the Town Managers Committee, trying to deal with getting a pilot agreement from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And Russ Tanzer reported to us last week, and I don't want to jump the gun in any sense, but since it's something we've been talking about, because we did raise it with the president of the seminary and some other people, that we might be wanting to make a long-term lease of one or two of their dormitories, which are married student dormitories. And it could greatly relieve the need to have affordable housing. So it's just a nascent, just being born.
So the town would lease?
Yeah.
How,
You don't have to evaluate it, Rick, yet.
No, I'm just
because it's being
curious.
hatched.
No,
But
no.
the point is, the, what's it called, something CD, the state organization, the
EHCD.
EHCD.
They would actually run it?
They said that they were very enthusiastic about it, and we have Hamilton Housing, which with Ipswich manages Hamilton Housing, and they would take over that kind of a building and run it too. So there's just beginning of ideas. Don't think it's.
They've had trouble filling them because more and more students would prefer to live off campus.
And because Trump has prevented their student body from getting into the country.
Well, that's true. There are a lot of African students on
Yeah,
student
a lot of
services.
Koreans
And their
and so forth.
enrollment has gone like this
Right.
over the last several years. At the same time, their online student enrollment has been like that, which is basically opposite, interestingly enough.
So, I know this is very preliminary, but is it something where you've got to have an X amount of, year lease for it to qualify?
No.
No?
so,
It hasn't been worked out. But Russ is on top of it, and he's met with the EHCD, and they've given us a green light. Try and work out something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, I would think you might, or we might want to think about that whole campus long-term in terms of potential zoning, because, and I have no firsthand knowledge, but given what's happening in the marketplace with small colleges, especially small niche colleges.
well, it'll get faced, because we're talking about long-term agreements with the
Good. Well,
college.
that's what I'm
and-
saying is, there's a potential, and we don't know when and if that may ever occur, and I have no knowledge that it will, but given the economics of what we're seeing, in some point in the future, that whole property could go up for sale. So we ought to be thinking about,
Well, they have 2 other campuses too, so you know.
right, there could be a consolidation at a much less expensive location. And I think it's-
2 other campuses.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One's in
one
North
is-
Carolina, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the south. But
I agree with Rick. I mean, absolutely. You have to,
It's a big land mass.
huge parcel of land, and we should think what's best for the town.
It's probably 200.
Well, but this would be like getting our foot in the door.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
Having a nice relationship with them,
This
taking
would,
over something, arranging for something like that.
I was hesitant to
Being their
even talk
adversary
about
would
it
be their
because
partner.
I don't want you guys to queer everything and start doing planning for it, because
No,
it's nothing like that. And we've got a very good relationship with the faculty and the members of the task force. So let us run with it for a little while, and just let's not say we need to take on a new
No, I-
thing.
No.
But since you brought it up, it is worth thinking about, and I think you and your committee ought to be thinking about that as well. It's good to have some short-term solutions, that's wonderful, but since you guys are negotiating and you actually have inside knowledge, it would be helpful to impart not only current thinking, but what might be future thinking in those discussions.
How many units are up there, like housing units?
There were 200 and some.
Yeah,
The new dorms
that's
they
right.
built were, I think, 150 or 200. That was built when I was on the planning board before, and I went
There were,
up and inspected them.
in the
They're,
married
you know,
student
generally quite
houses,
nice.
there's 30 units in 2 buildings. So that makes 60 units, just that.
In the new area?
Yeah.
The other part of this that is very relevant to what the Open Space Committee is doing is one of the parts of the goals and everything is a property acquisition plan. And it's primarily oriented towards open space and recreation. There's a lot of recreational land up there, and
It's,
it could come under that, and
unless it's mountain climbing or skiing, because it's pretty steep.
You got to be careful of these things. The last time a development plan took place on an ecumenical site was Turner Hill in Ipswich, right? That was a
Seminary.
seminary convent.
They made it,
And that development looks terrific, you think. It's been bankrupt, 14 times. Huge amounts of money lost on it.
But it's providing
that-
tax revenue to the town.
yeah.
And
All
it
I'm-
actually looks great. Ted Turner built a terrific development that, bankrupted him 3 times.
All I'm getting at is that it could be part of the plan. The town needs to start thinking about setting up money reserves to be able to buy properties if they need to. This may be one that could go on a potential list. It's all pie in the sky, like Peter is saying, but yet it's got to be thought
Right
about.
site for commercial development, right? You go look at, what's the,
a heliport.
used to be Mullen, and then it went to conference center, and now it's the school. What's that?
Yeah.
That's
Penguin
a
Hall.
similar kind of, big piece of
Right,
land.
yeah.
Buildings that are just total.
We've heard
Albatrosses.
nothing about it being on the rocks yet.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so, do we have anything else to discuss?
I don't think so.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Peter, I'm glad you.